Me.
Thanks.
I'm starting now.
Sweet. Okay. Welcome to the inaugural. Hey, Chris, how's it going? Welcome to the inaugural WebRTC Vancouver meetup. The shot was taken by a fellow by the name of Trevor May. He's a local here, and he was kind enough to allow us to use it for our banner, our city site screenshot there. So for me, this is where computers and communication all came together. I was 8 years old. My dad bought this thing called an MSI 8080. It was a hexadecimal program, kit computer, and you managed to cobble enough rubles together to get a teletype, and his buddy on the other side of the country did the same thing, and they were able to send messages to each other through these hexadecimal programs they wrote through teletypes. And he was also a pretty avid ham radio operator. So at a very young age, I was kind of exposed to this, computer communications kind of motif. So we jump ahead about, a lot of years. And we have internet commercialization in 1995. And iPhone came along long before the iPhone we all know today, made by Vocaltech, which was a software application using the H.323 protocol. And then we, move forward a few years, and I find myself on a panel with Nicholas Zenstrom, the founder of Skype, debating, open standards versus proprietary protocols. And I was a big believer in the open standards and open communication. Been working on WebRTC related software since its inception in 2011, and working on RTC software in general for about 15 years now. So what is our WebRTC? It's basically an emerging standard from the open standards communities, the W3C and the IETF, defining a client-side set of APIs to enable real-time communications in browsers without plugins or third-party software. So Adobe's going to have to come up with, somebody's making coffee, man. Adobe's going to have to come up with a different model here, because Flash is going to be out of it completely if this goes the way it should.
For the client side and
yeah, so those are all various RTC communications, clients. Those guys can leverage WebRTC on top of whatever they're building to, enable browser-based communications with whatever they're doing. Right? So this is more of an open standards approach, and Fring is more of a proprietary approach. Right? They may be using open standards, but they're not using it in a way that allows people to take advantage of it. So there's a link to the WebRTC charter from the W3C there, if you're interested. So what can we build with this stuff? A lot of things. The obvious things come to mind: real-time voice and video chat. So things like Google Hangouts are built on WebRTC. P2P content distribution networks, there's a whole bunch of those that have popped up. A couple of them have already been bought. So you can share content from a peer-to-peer perspective. That leverages an aspect of the technology called data channel. And if you do a little digging and you take a look at the code samples out there, you can build something pretty quick. Gaming, there's some gaming opportunities there. File transfer is another big one. Internet of Things, machine to machine, and basically whatever you can think of. Anything that is one node to another node, and just about any aspect that you can imagine has its application here. So who uses it today? Companies that you may have heard of before, like Snapchat, Facebook, Perch.
yeah.
Hey. Uber Conference, Free Switch, the guys that have been so generous to host our live online conference right now. Amazon has a product called Mayday, which is basically a support button that does a one-way video broadcast onto your tablet that helps you understand how to use your device, which I thought was a pretty novel approach. Slack just bought a WebRTC. All right. Sorry for you. Medium.
Medical videos.
Medical video. Good. Okay. I won't. mispronounce it again, I promise. Yeah, so there's quite a few people using WebRTC already. Here's some specification history, so a bit more, political, technical talk. Actually started working with the spec. 2013, early implementations of apps, and a couple of folks and myself, in parallel to the work that was going on in the IETF working groups and the W3C working groups, formed a community group called the ORTC community group, which I'll get into in a second, which kind of plays hand in hand with WebRTC. So that kind of brings us to current day. So what's happened this year is user media, which is the media component of the API, just passed last call. And there was a WebRTC ORTC task force that was just recently convened to try and bring these two groups together. And maybe we'll see WebRTC 1.0 spec last call this year if we're fortunate. We'll see. There's a lot of ground to cover. So where are we at from a browser state of the union? This is supposed to be technology that, brings everybody together, right? And brings everybody into the same technological sphere. And if we look at this, we kind of go, what? Like, how's that helping me? Well, it gets even more complicated. So ORTC, this group that we started, WebRTC is using a lot of technology that is very fitting for today's standards and for what is happening today. But we wanted to kind of go past that and say, okay, well, let's think about what happens 5 years from now, or let's think about where we're going to be at in 5 years from now. So we started another community group in the W3C called the ORTC, which was meant to kind of augment what was happening in the WebRTC sphere. And the benefits that we were looking to get out of this community group and the work we did there was mainly around mobile, because as a lot of people know from experience, WebRTC on mobile is really not easy. And there's a lot of shortcomings. So we set to work to try and fix a lot of those problems. Some of the big ones are ice, stun, turn, all of the natural traversal stuff that you hit when you're roaming from cellular hotspot to Wi-Fi to 3G to 4G. Those are some of the things that we kind of paid a lot of attention to in the ORTC community group. Quality of service and scalable video. So being able to handle video from a handheld to a 4K telepresence system, and be able to do that gracefully using JavaScript versus C++. Those are the kind of things that we kind of look at in the community group. So now we're at a point where we're going through a recharter in the WebRTC working group. The 1.0 spec is nearly done. Yay! It's been 4 years. A lot of hard work. So we're nearly there. ORTC and the WebRTC community group and working groups are likely to converge. That's the speak in the open standards communities today. So that's double yay. We don't have to think about two different things, which would be nice. The bad news is the both specs are in a bit of flux still. So there still is room to grow. The good news is you can use it today. So there are libs, there are tools out there that you can go out and leverage. Go to webrtc.org, and you can start taking advantage of these things to build apps for Chrome and Firefox, desktop browser apps, to mobile for iOS and Android apps, and consequently, this technology was supposed to be built for browsers, but the majority of the draw that's been happening in the market has been purely native mobile. So, and there's a huge number of reasons for that. It's really hard to control what happens in a browser when you don't control what happens in the browser. So a lot of people just took it upon themselves to build it all native right into their applications. So those libraries are available today for WebRTC, not just from Google, who is the the operator of WebRTC.org. And just to make things really, really confusing here, Google is a vendor of WebRTC technology. They aren't the ones who dictate what happens in the spec. So there's a difference between the vendor and the specification. The specification is is a contribution of many companies, and we all decide how this tech is going to actually be deployed in an API. And then there's the the vendor-specific stuff, and it just so happens that Google is probably the largest stakeholder in the WebRTC space. They've given away, likely billions of dollars worth of tech to try and get this thing to go. So, which is why WebRTC.org belongs to them. So, Hookflash created an equally confusing URL, ORTC.org, and that's where you'll find out information about the ORTC API. And it's really not all that important to you guys today. That API has a library that's associated with it, but there's really nothing to implement there until later on in 2015. And hopefully by then we'll be at a point where the working group and the community group will be kind of converging, and you don't have to even think about it. So here's a question that I get quite a bit is, well, if this is all P2P, why do I need servers? And if you guys have any experience in telecom or communications at all, you'll soon find out that in order to get a packet off the firewall over a natural traversal device, you're going to need something that allows you to do that. And that far and natural traversal is usually dealt with by way of some other open standards called stun and turn. So you can do this yourself. There's free open source servers that you can throw up. Google hosts their own free servers that you can use. There's software as a service that you can leverage out there. A couple of them I just mentioned. Or you can throw it in your own rack, or you can have somebody else host it yourself. It's really not rocket science. It's just a little bit of elbow grease. So don't panic. There's plenty of help out there. The mail lists have been great. There's dev forums and groups, conferences, expos, and meetups like this are good to learn more about the tech. A simple search for WebRTC training, WebRTC consulting will yield you a huge number of results. So,
Excuse me for the WebRTC trainings online training.
Training? Yeah, there's tons of training online. Just go WebRTC training and you'll see literally tens of thousands of hits. Yeah.
If WebRTC is a major, when not in North America, right? How about in Europe or Southeast Asia?
It's pretty prolific everywhere. Yeah, I mean, Europe there's quite a few companies out of Europe that are building WebRTC specific stuff. Asia specifically, I've seen some stuff come out of Japan. China Mobile, I think, is working on something. So yeah, it's pretty prolific. And since it's all open source, none of it, it's all MIT Apache open source. There's no LGBL here, so there's no IPR encumbrances. So that makes it easy for people to use and not have to worry about, if I sell my company and I have all this technology that has LGPL, do I have to go through all these hoops to get it? No, it's real open source, which is kind of nice.
I can remember, how old is the WebRTC in the market?
Pardon me?
How old is what's the history? How many years of WebRTC?
Oh, WebRTC was founded in the IETF working group in 2011. 2011, yeah. So I think the first public draft, let's go back to the history here. The first public draft, first working draft was in 2012. Early implementations 2013. 2014 we see some commercial implementations. And this year it's really starting to get some movement. So one thing that I kind of breezed by here. So this problem here still exists. This one in between the Google and the Microsoft camp, we feel is going to get rectified by way of this kind of convergence of the specs between ORTC and WebRTC, so that top X should go away. Now, these two X's pointing to Apple, who own nearly half of the mobile market for browsing, anyway, and mobile devices in general, smart devices. They aren't saying much. There's been a few rumors floating around that we might hear them announce something at WWDC this year. So I might actually hear something like next month, which could be pretty interesting. So if they go down this path and they open it up a little bit and not hide behind the Apple, silo, or hide in the Apple silo, then we could be in for a pretty wild ride in the next 5 years in terms of real-time communications on the web. So that's it for me. Oh, sorry.
You mentioned NAT reversal and stuff. How does IPv6 affect all this? Because that's a whole different kind.
That's a whole different, bag of worms. So WebRTC out of the box does not handle that really great today. ORTC does. ORTC library that we're working on and we'll have ready in the fall handles that really gracefully. There are a couple of specs that are coming out of the IETF, which is where kind of all the media side of this business happens, who are addressing that as well. So I think in the next, 5-6 months, that problem will go away.
In 20 years' time, when we all have IPv6, you may not need servers, I guess.
Right. Exactly. We hope. We hope that NAT just goes away completely.
20 years is probably
That's probably not a bad estimate.
How stable is it on, say, an iPhone or site showing that? I'm wondering, does it handle echo cancellation, repeated calls, all the scenarios well, or does it make more sense to use something with H.264 and transpose it into?
So this is the interesting thing, good question. So this is the interesting thing about WebRTC. WebRTC is basically the media stack inside the browser. And you call it via JavaScript APIs, or you wrap it and you call it via iOS or Android or C++ even, right? That media stack comes with auto gain cancellation, echo cancellation. They basically bought a company called Global IP Sound out of Europe. I think it was Estonia or Stockholm. I can't remember. It was one of the Scandinavian countries. And just a phenomenal technical achievement in terms of their ability to build media stacks. They were the supplier for Skype's media stack before Skype got bought by Microsoft. And all of a sudden, Microsoft changed a bunch of stuff and can't have that media stack being open source. But anyways, long story short, they acquired this company, and then they, like a year later, open sourced all of it. So they paid, I don't know, a huge amount of money for this company, and then turned it over to the open source community entirely. And that was to kick off this WebRTC technology and try and get rid of the plugins and the third-party software required for real-time media. So to answer your question, they work really hard on the media stack. That's kind of their baby. The pieces that are missing are all of the signaling components. So in the traditional telecom world, you have stuff like SIP, right? And SIP is pretty prolific. It's kind of like the de facto standard for voice over IP signaling. Well, in the WebRTC world, you can elect to use SIP, or you can elect to use, JSON and WebSockets. You don't have to be using one thing or another, which kind of makes this, better for everybody. So, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, well, actually, from an iPhone point of view, you
Yeah.
look at that.
Oh, okay. Hardware acceleration.
As opposed to software, right, where
Yep.
you get dramatically different battery level. I'm just wondering how responsive, is the phone going to burn up your hand because it's, in software? Does it actually work? Can you actually make a shipping solution, or should you?
So let me take a shot at that, and then I'm going to hand off to Chris from PERT. And these guys have some real experience with doing mobile and real time. So the quick answer to that is the stuff that's shipping in WebRTC today is using VP8, which is the open source stuff from WebM and GIPS. And that has some hardware acceleration depending on what device you're using. And then there's now an H.264, not a plugin, but a hack, I guess, extension to the WebRTC source. And they've brought that in. So now you can actually use H.264. And if you have an H.264 hardware accelerator on your device, you can make use of that. There's also a new H.264 program that just came out of Cisco last year, which is also all open source. So everybody's thrown in a big way. And when it comes to implementing and the user experience from deploying on mobile, these guys would know more than I would in that realm. So, Chris, why don't you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for hardware H.264 support, apparently it's coming in a few weeks to the open source, like the WebRTC.org code base. So it's being worked on. If you've been following the news, Twilio and OpenTalk just announced H.264 hardware acceleration on iOS. So with some limitations, of course, no simulcast, things like that. But yeah, basically, like they went ahead now that the media engine supports H.264 and actually, implemented hardware acceleration on iOS.
Are they open sourcing that?
Good question. So Justin Huberti from Google has said that they're working on hardware acceleration. It's going to be in there in the next few weeks, but they didn't say where the code is coming from. So I don't know whether OpenTalk or Twilio is going to contribute that back, because I think they kind of developed it on their own, essentially. So yeah, either there's going to be 3 different implementations of the same thing, or one of those guys is contributing back to the project.
That might be the word that I'm hearing is that they're not going to be using the Cisco stuff.
Oh no, I don't think so.
And they're not going to be taking somebody else's. It's probably going to be.
Well, so basically, like, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really understand all the patents and everything, how that all plays into it. But my understanding is with Apple, if using their hardware encoder and decoder, like they've already paid as like the last company in the chain, they've already paid for it, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. So you should be able to leverage that on any device that has a decoder. You hope.
Yeah.
Right? Practically, that sounds like the right answer.
Yeah.
It's also not going to land in H.264 support. That's what they said. They were like, oh, you're free to
extension.
contribute it back.
I mean, so Chrome on iOS doesn't really, it's basically just WebKit, right? So
right.
I guess that's not really something they could ship.
Yeah, so hence the native development on mobile devices, right?
Yeah.
And also, what's going into Microsoft Edge? Is that going to be H.264?
Yeah, hold on.
So we'll have 2 wonderful products that, they're completely compatible except at the recorder level.
So there's interesting ways to get around that, right? Like you have, I won't speculate what Microsoft is going to ship. They've made it pretty clear that Skype for Web is going to leverage ORTC to, and you can be using shims at runtime, downloaded and at install, right, to create compatibility between the 2 different stacks. So you can have, this 264 talking about 264, there isn't a real answer to that yet, but there's some creative.
It's very hard to put this on your site. Like, if you want to have like a customer-facing site,
yeah.
These are like incredible roadblocks.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, I think most of the vendors, and, I don't know about all the vendors, but most of the vendors logically are going to deploy both, right? You're going to have VP8 and 264 on whatever you're doing. Because if you're trying to interop, like you said, with different devices and different modals, you're going to need to support both. And there's no way around it. So I think most of the vendors out there have already agreed, and as a matter of fact, the vote that was taken last year, I think it was last year, even earlier this year, was that, I think it was last year, that the browser vendors specifically have to support both. Yeah.
So is there nothing around to H.264?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're
Not just on mobile, but on desktop.
Do they do anything on mobile? I'm sorry. They've made it really clear, and I was sitting right beside Adam Roach in a IETF WebRTC meeting, and I think it was either him or Eric Scola that stood up and said, yes, we're going to support both. So they're supporting 264 and VP8, which is good, and that's the same. We should have that same level of cooperation from the other vendors as well. That remains to be seen, but
Except out.
Except that, well, Apple is a huge, proponent of 264, right? I mean, 265. So
They use it already in FaceTime.
totally, yeah. The 265 is heavily used in FaceTime right now. So I think that, if they, because they were, FaceTime's already mostly open standards anyway, right? Like it's SIP and it's using all of the off-the-shelf, voice over IP tech, aside from a little bit of sauce. So to have them step up and say, hey, we're going to support WebRTC and maybe have a slightly different flavor, but you guys can all play by calling these APIs. I mean, I'd love to. I think everybody would love to hear and say that. So I don't want to hog all the time here, so I want to get Tobias up to talk about Medio, which is a really cool virtual visit application for clinical visits. So over to you. I'm going to jump off this AirPlay just so I don't cause any. Can you actually stream to the same Apple TV device simultaneously? That'd be kind of interesting. Yeah.
So I think it's off and try to do it. Yeah, same thing.
Okay.
Can you tell me
let's
something
stop.
about the future of RTC? It will be free.